Hi, this is Zach with Worn&Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Fortis Aviatis Cockpit Two. This is a new watch from Fortis that was released at Basel World this year that we really got a kick out of. Thought it was a really nice design. There's two in this series, the Cockpit 1 and the Cockpit 2, the difference being the use of some accent colors. Obviously here you have one with some bright orange highlights, which gives it kind of a more modern, a little bit of an aggressive feel. This is an interesting watch and design-wise. You know, it's kind of a spin on some familiar themes, pilot watches, aviator watches, but definitely has a unique look unto itself. Has some interesting elements in the typeface, the use of an altimeter style date window, and then just generally nice detailing all around. It's also, I think, a very well-priced watch, coming in with a strap at $1,170, which is quite, I think, just like I said, a very fair price for a newly made, Swiss-made automatic watch. It's powered by a Swiss ETA 2836-2 movement, which is a very good movement. So yeah, it offers a really nice value. Let's take a closer look. The case of the Fortis Aviatis Cockpit Two is a nice medium size. It's 41 millimeters in diameter, about 47.3 millimeters lug to lug, and about 11 millimeters tall. So it's a very kind of average size, a little bit larger. It has a nice modern build, but it's not oversized by any means. And it has a decent, the lug to lug isn't too long, which I think is actually the most important dimension in terms of wearability. And then 11 millimeters is fairly thin. It has a flat sapphire crystal, so that's probably part of what's keeping the number low. And when you look at the case just from the top down, it has a very simple design, but a nice kind of robust line. So you have a mid case here that it actually tapers a little bit, which I'll show you from the side. So it's not totally flat sides. And then a wide bezel, and that bezel is polished, so that has a nice little glint of light. I like that they played with finishing on this, which I feel like pilot watches, aviator watches tend to be a little bit more subdued in finishing, so that little bit of play just kind of dresses things up, makes it a little more interesting. And then you have thick lugs coming off the side, and that just gives it a nice stance. The crown here on the right side is very oversized and kind of a signature Fortis design. It's 7.5 millimeters wide by about 4.5 millimeters long, so it's a big crown, kind of refers to, classic pilot onion crowns, things of that nature. And it's a really nice look. It's very deep teeth, has a nice bevel on it. It's a cool design. The one thing that I was a little surprised by, though, it is not screw down. That doesn't really, affect things. This is still has 100-meter water resistance, but I just expected it to have, that screw down feel, so it's just nice and locked in. Looking at it from the side, you can see the finishing and the design just a little bit more. It's like I said, it's very simple and clean. The case does taper up a little bit. Then you hit this tall bezel, and you can see the finishing there more, those really nice horizontal lines, horizontal brushing on the mid case, which then breaks into the polishing on the bezel. The little bit of contrast there is very attractive. You can also see now on the Fortis crown here, which also has a polished finish. They have the little Fortis crown shape on the crown, which looks very nice. Flipping the case over, you have a display case back here, very minimal detailing around, just Fortis automatic, water resistant, 10 bar. Display window here showing off the ETA 2836-2 movement. It's pretty undecorated, nothing really special going on there. It has Fortis on the rotor. This, I think, could go either way. If they had covered that up and put some art on the case back, I don't think I would have missed seeing the movement since it isn't decorated. But since it isn't a dive watch or anything, it has 100-meter water resistance or 10 bar water resistance. You can still show it off. So it is always enjoyable to look at. Looking now at the dial of the Fortis Cockpit 2, I mean, this is really where the watch comes to life. You have a stepped matte black dial. So you can see there's a kind of an inner area and then an outer area. It's not really like a chaptering because it's not kind of a sitting on the outside, but it's just a big step down in the center. So you have kind of two zones of information, which immediately just makes it gives it an interesting look. And then what they did was obviously they put the hour track on the inside and the minute or second track on the outside, which gives a nice military feel, definitely speaks to this aviator instrument panel styling. And just overall, it's just well done. So just taking a kind of more specific look, you have this hour index on the inside here. You have long lines that are then alternated with 12, 6, and 9. The typeface that they use actually all around is very different. It's very intriguing, rather than the kind of standard overly bold typeface that you often find on aviators, or the more kind of simplistic, simple ones you find on Flieger. This is actually a little bit more stylized. It's still very clear, but it's a bit thinner. The shapes are kind of interesting. It's a little bit hard to describe, but they're not quite round. They're not quite faceted. It almost has a slightly like hand-drawn quality in an interesting way. And that just gives the watch a very different and unique personality that I think is part of what's extremely appealing about it. Also in this inner track here, you have a large day date. So this might be a bit of a divisive detail here. You obviously have the day, Friday, as it indicates now, on the inside, and then an altimeter style date window on the outside. So that obviously speaks to the kind of the instrument panel theme going on here. And what you have is the date, which is lined up at 3, and then the next day and the previous day around that. I think that they integrated it really well here, and it balances everything out. So visually speaking, I quite like it, and though I typically don't love that concept of the altimeter date window, because I don't need to see what day is previous and what day is next, just like information I don't need. But because it's so balanced here, it works. It lines up with the edge of that inner area. It balances with the 12, the 3, the 6, and the 9. So it feels in place, which is great, and I think if that's a detail you think is very cool, then this is probably actually the best execution of that I've ever seen. Looking now at the outer ring, as I said, you have a minute or second index, all double digits, which I like. Definitely gives it a very military feel. Then you have a white 12 triangle at 12, giving it the kind of obvious pilot feel. On this model, the Cockpit 2, you have these reddish-orange highlights at the quarter hour, as well as outlining the triangle. On the Cockpit 1, they forego that, and they just have kind of an interesting sort of green color for the numbers. So this one has a more modern and aggressive feel, whereas the other one's a little bit more vintage. Frankly, they're both quite attractive. Now looking at the hands, this has Fortis's sort of signature take on the pilot aviator hand. So you'll see this on several of their watches. The hour and the minute are like a Roman sword shape, but the way the loom is kind of positioned in them is interesting. So as you can see, especially on the hour, you have that classic shape, but then the loom, rather than just kind of following the outline, tapers sharply in. So it has this kind of interesting, almost diamond shape or kind of coffin shape. And it's just a cool look. It's very modern looking. The minute hand is much thinner and longer and sharper. They balance well with each other. They're very clear. And then the second hand is a tapering stick with a very bright orange on it. So, that really stands out, really jumps out, and once again kind of plays off that sort of aggressive look from the other highlights in there. The only thing left to mention is that the loom on this dial is actually a little bit funny. It's the one thing I was a little bit surprised by. It is present on the hands, the hour and the minute, and there it glows fairly brightly. But then on the dial itself, it is only present in the triangle at 12. And it's frankly so faint that I didn't notice it initially. I had to charge it more than once to kind of see that glowing. Obviously it's not the biggest concern, but I was expecting perhaps the 12, 6, and 9 to glow, or some other markers on the dial as well. On the wrist, the Cockpit 2 wears very nicely. Like I said, 41 millimeters by 47.3. That's a decent size. It's a kind of a medium, maybe verging on large, but not oversized by any means. And I think it works very well with this style. So the watch, as you can see, it's so dial focused. It's a very wide dial, and that really works, I think, with the instrument theme. It's supposed to be a little bit bolder, really about legibility. So you get that from this design, and it is an extremely legible watch. I mean, at a glance, it's just so easy to read. I actually think there's a really nice logic to having the hours on the minute on the inside and the minutes on the outside for kind of how you actually read it, being that often the minutes are really what you need to know first. So yeah, you get that nice presence, and it's very attractive. Like I said, it speaks to these aviator and pilot styles that you're very familiar with, but it doesn't look like anyone you've seen before. That's not really something you get to say very often with pilot or aviator watches. So I really like that. I really like that it has a unique style when you look at it. And then, yeah, just, as you can see on the wrist, it's just, it fits well. 7-inch wrist here. The lug to lug being 47.3 makes it, not kind of fly over the edge of the wrist, which I think is the most important detail. 11 millimeters tall, is it's thin, you know, it's just comfortable and light, which is nice. It features 20 millimeter lugs, which I think is a good size for a 41 millimeter watch. There's a bracelet version as well, but here we have a leather strap, and this is like a sport leather strap, so the leather itself has been kind of treated. I believe it could even be water resistant, I'm not sure, but it has that sort of semi-rubbery feel to it. But it's nice. It has a nice sheen. It's kind of a, you know, a black, like a matte-ish black. There's a little bit of satin to it. It has a nice heavy contrast stitching here. So it's a kind of a rugged and aggressive-looking strap, which I think obviously works with the sport style here. You have a very simple buckle in brushed, nothing too special going on there. Obviously, you know, with a watch like this, you could put any number of different types of straps on it, from you know, nylons to, you know, just rubber or heavier leathers, and I think it'll take to them all very well. To wrap up, the Fortis Aviatis Cockpit Two, I think it's a very cool watch and definitely a very attractive watch from this brand that, as I said, is kind of suggestive of a new direction for them, and it's exciting to see. You know, as I said, perhaps the most compelling things about this watch are the price kind of to the style, and then, you know, obviously just the quality of its build. But, you know, for $1,170, it's a really compelling price for a Swiss-made watch with a Swiss-made movement at this point, especially from a brand such as Fortis that is very reputable. And then just the fact that it doesn't look like other pilots and aviators out there. You know, it's just, you get used to a certain style, you don't see a lot of innovation, and Fortis definitely did something different here and, you know, gave it their own unique twist, which I think works really well, is very cool looking, and certainly distinct. Otherwise, it's just a very comfortable watch, a very nice looking watch, you know, and like I said, well built. My only issues with it, screw down crown is kind of, you know, not really an issue so much as just something I expected, but then the lume on the dial being a little bit lacking was, you know, the more critical one. Would have loved to see more lume, but it doesn't, you know, affect the day-to-day usage of the watch. It's still very legible, still very stylish, you know, just in the circumstance of, you know, being in the dark. If you really need the most legibility, this is not going to offer it. Please read the full review on Worn&Wound. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you.